Telegram. So give me just a sec. We should be live here in just a moment.
Yeah.
I think we are.
Does it say that we are?
Yeah,
It hasn't shown me that. Okay, I haven't gotten the YouTube link yet. Give me just a sec. I usually have this like 30-second lag time where I'm never sure if I'm live yet or not. This is every single live video that I ever do.
Pretty sure that's happening right now.
What's happening? Like, hello, if you're live, you're in my lag moment. Okay, we're good. I just need to get this link into our group.
How do we get this thing closer? Last time we were very far. There we go.
And into my Discord. Okay, we're good now. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I have two of my favorite people on the planet. I say that to you guys, and I think I've said that to you guys before, and I truly mean it. Ben and Joyce were both in the same cohort, CCA cohort with me. So I've known you guys through that, but also, of course, the Wolf Den. And I wanted to bring you guys on today for one, just so we can talk a little bit about what's happening, which I mentioned a little bit in Telegram in the Luna chat, is something that Ben is putting together for Wolf Den members called the CCA pack. And we're going to be opening that up to certain Luna Den members as well. But then I just want to chat about life and what we've taken away from our time and experience thus far being in this community. Kind of feels like we're in a little bit of a bubble in our community, but I love it. And also, I just remembered Ben and Joyce, I don't know if you have been like immersed as well, but you've been in Nick and Dan's world for quite some time now. So Ben is like masterful note taker, and every time there's an event or anything of sorts, you come out with this like ridiculously well done outtake, and I'm very blown away. But it also, I think, makes sense just in your time and experience being in the community, of ability to understand and implement things in that we're learning into your life. This is something I've continued to bring up on every single interview as of late. Is I think it's so vitally important that we understand that everything we're learning online, even if it's not just in our communities, even if I'm not referring to CCA and Wolf Den, but like anything, any type of information we get online, if we don't know how to actually live it, like what does it matter? And the reason I say that is, for a lot of us, we're spending a lot of time on Discord and on Telegram, whatever platforms that we're participating in these communities, on Zoom. But if we fail to recognize where these lessons and principles actually show up in our day-to-day life, it was all pointless. And I just bring that up because I've seen the way you've been able to implement, and I think it's really beautiful. So anyways, that's my intro. Welcome, guys, to the Luna Den YouTube. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thanks,
Thank
Courtney.
you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say his note-taking ability is unbelievable, but this is more of even Ben's superpower, his ability to take these complex ideas and really simplify them and like make them so that you can see like just the way that it's organized. There's like a real clear flow, and I know it's helped tremendously with myself as I go through a lot the thinking exercise or things like that, and even in our organization, his ability to be able to take these complex environment or things that are happening in our business and be able to communicate it with our leaders so that they can bring it down to the ground. He's excellent at that.
Well, thank you guys. I'll admit I can really relate to something you just said though about content, consuming content and things. I know for years, I think I definitely struggled with that, and because when I was younger, I was an athlete, and I kind of wanted to pursue that. And I came into like entrepreneurship and invested in things later in my life. I had no really exposure to it. I didn't even understand the words. Joyce was actually the one that exposed me to it. And then I became this kind of ravage book reader and I never read except for like the absolute minimum requirements I might need to pass a test or something in school. Like I would never read, I would never listen to educational stuff, whatever. I was focused on my sport and things like that, hockey. And then actually when I got together with Joyce, she was in outside sales and she was doing all this personal development and things. And I think I saw like notes in her car, like in motivational books and stuff. And I ended up reading like a sales book and a business book. And then I just went totally crazy. And there's probably years that went by that I was like, every second I was driving, every second I was brushing my teeth, I was like, because I felt like I had all this to catch up on. So I was listening to podcasts, I was listening to books, investing books, real estate books, like business books, stuff like that. But I probably did years of just like consuming, and I think just over one of the reasons why I do those notes and why, I do that for me more selfishly than and then share it with the community, because I want to take action and want to have some type of result from these networking, these workshop type sessions. And I think for years I just consumed so much, and that helped to some degree, like just me get kind of my mind around like the way that certain people think or talk and things like that. But it didn't necessarily translate into anything in my life, versus now when I can come into an event like with Dan and Nick, for example, which there's so much to be shared. It's almost annoying to the point is for the amount of questions that I'll like, because people ask sometimes like, anyone have like, they're an hour over time, they'll ask who has questions. I'm like, I'm gonna ask a question. So I'll ask them like, I'm gonna take advantage of this opportunity. So I'll ask very specific questions like how this, like for my business or something. And then I'll take time to summarize afterwards. And if you'll notice, like a lot of times the notes that I share, I think the reason like they've been helpful to people, it's not usually just a summary of the points of the session. It's like how what it means to me and like the kind of breakthroughs that I've been, and I try to admit things like, oh, I've totally been making a mistake in this area of my business or my life, and this is what I learned about it. And so I found when I've done that the last couple of years, it's made a major difference than just consuming all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on a couple of points. I think one is, overconsumption of information and how that's never useful until we actually know how to apply it. I think the next one is when you're sharing these notes and people are taking a lot away from it, what I get from that is there's a difference in learning from someone who's just teaching because they have all the information versus like it's a way of being. So it's really easy to receive that kind of applicable shift for someone else. Like if you're the one who's living this out, my ability to receive what I need from it is just astronomically higher than someone who's just teaching a bunch of information when it's a way of being, because it's more of an energetic exchange rather than I'm really trying to understand where you're coming from and how this can apply to my life. So your ability to take like these practical principles, which have also been, implemented into other people's lives, but then for yourself to implement into your life is just kind of creating a ripple effect for others to be able to do the same. So
yes. It's a really good point. I think, Courtney, when we did our live in the Luna Den, I think one of the things I really talked about too was I felt that I was over consuming and I was very distracted. So I was taking I wasn't looking at anything for a while, and it still kind of continued. I'd slowly coming back into being very particular on who I'm listening to. Obviously, if Dan and Nick and Randy, Dr. Jeff, they put something out, I want to listen to that, but I'm keeping the circle small.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, like you said, like there's this and Jan talks a lot about being careful of these like sayings, like knowledge is power. Well, it's actually applied knowledge that's power, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing about what happens when Ben shares the notes is there's a vulnerability in it. We're applying it to our daily lives, not only business, but personally. And you, like you said, it amplifies the learning. And I think that's why CCA in particular has been so impactful for me, because Dan and Nick and Randy, they embody what they're talking about. Like they live it every day, and you see that, and because of that, the momentum and the power of the information, it like hits a different way. It hits harder, So that's why it's been so powerful for me, because none of the stuff they necessarily talk about is not anything that I haven't heard before, but it's irrelevant if I've heard it but did nothing with it to apply it. And so that's why I believe, the last really 6 months in my life has been life-changing. And I know people say that all the time, but I really believe the way that I show up today and the way that I feel, more importantly, the way that I feel about myself has like dramatically changed. And that is a byproduct of having educators who embody what they're actually teaching, and the group of people in the community doing the same thing. So it's just magnified the learning.
Yeah, like our ability to take this into our own lives is often even less about like the specificities of the content. While that's actually really valuable because a teaching aspect is very useful, there's another side of it where just being immersed, where your surroundings and your environment are breeding this way of being, it starts to click and you can see how it fits into your own life and you start to make decisions differently. You start to see yourself differently, you start to see others differently, and that's where that embedded and embodiedness comes from. And that's, I think, that's the goal. So I'm curious for both of you, you can both answer this. When did you start to see the shifts? Because if you've been in kind of this world of, I know Ben, you were saying you've been consuming a lot of like self-improvement content, but there's a different type of experience to be had than just being in self-improvement, right? Like there's so many people in the world consuming self-improvement content.
For me, and like you said, we've actually, we've known came into Nick's world a while ago. Crazy story. Joyce will share at some point. We met him in a maximum security prison. Not because
can you share here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, we
can finish your thought, and then we can share that.
I'll finish the thought. Joyce will tell the story.
Okay.
But I think really just recently, I think what the realization that I've had is that I had years of consuming content. I had all these podcasts and all these things, books I had to catch up to. I had to catch up. I had to fit, because I felt like this feeling of catching up. And we joined tons of masterminds and things too. I mean, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on entrepreneurial coaching programs, masterminds, workshops, events, things like that over the years. And it's certainly there's results. I mean, we've grown our businesses, we've grown revenues, we've learned things, but all of it, I don't think I ever felt better along the way. If that means, if anything, I probably felt more stressed and more pressure and more obligation and more, so you
catching up, the feeling that you're talking about is like it's almost worse off than not having the information.
You dream of like, oh, when I have $1 million business, then like everything's going to be great, whatever. Or then it's like, oh my God, it's worse. And then you're like, well, when it gets to 2 million, or and so you're in this pursuit or this chase, and you're trying to catch up, and you're trying to keep up, and you're trying to compare to other, bigger, to be as good enough or big enough or whatever it is. And I think the realization I had recently is like that's what has been happening for 10 years, for example. And so really just coming through CCA, I think was where it became more clear about like what, actually applying things towards what you want and being and playing your game. And that's what we'll probably get into more, is like understanding yourself. And Joyce mentioned that a little bit as well, and releasing the shame or guilt or the whip behind you that's pushing you to try to catch up or to prove yourself or to try to be better than, or whatever, be good enough, whatever those things are in the back of your head that you're probably unconsciously chasing, and actually like say, okay, I can let go of all of this and I can actually design, the life that I want and the person I want to be. And it's okay to be who I am, and that's just a total different, it's kind of a gut punch as well. And it's, it's that freedom, instead of freedom from like the chasing and running to freedom to like the freedom to be who you are supposed to be or who you want to be without like that worry and that stress. And that's pretty recent, I think, for both of us.
I love it.
Yeah. With you saying that, I think for me, like it's the push versus pull feeling. And I felt like we've been pushing for a long time. And now there's moments where you need to push. I get that there's seasons where that needs to happen. But if the majority of your life you're pushing, it just creates way more stress and way more pressure. And you miss all these amazing opportunities, I think, that are surrounding you because you just get way too hyper focused on trying to chase more and you don't even realize it. And so that was some of the things that opened up my eyes in CCA, was like, we were chasing more and it was like on the hamster wheel, like, and the awareness wasn't there. Like, we didn't know that all these decisions were for more, but when is enough, right? And so having things start to shift where we could say, okay, it's not about more, because that's what society teaches us, right? And it gets so ingrained, but it's about closer. How do we get closer to what we want? And in order to get closer, you actually need to look in the mirror and face some things that are happening within yourself before you can even identify what next action step to take. And then for me, I started to see this. Of course, we got into this to grow our business, or to, whatever it is, business oriented. We didn't realize how much of this was also the way that we were approaching business, we were also doing in our personal life. And it needs to, like, your goals should incorporate both your personal and your professional life. But for me, I saw some of the things that we were learning in CCA really start to show up in my personal life. So, like, let me give you an example. I've struggled myself with like balancing being a working mom, like an entrepreneur, where I believe the work never really ends, and being a mom. And I felt so much like guilt and shame when I, like, for example, if I was working and I wasn't with my kiddos, I was like, I felt guilt and shame that I wasn't with them. And then when I was with my kids, I felt guilt and shame that I wasn't focusing on the organization. And part of that was just not playing my game and not realizing, like, what are the things that I want out of my own life. And when I started to, like, just look in the mirror and realize that, like, it's not about being the type of mom that everybody else wants me to be, but it's about being the type of mom that I want to be, that then I could find more of a balance and incorporate, like, me chasing my goals. I don't have to have an all or nothing thinking, and that I could do both. It's that ampersand. I could be a great business leader or an entrepreneur and be a great mom. That's when, like, things started to shift for me, and I started to feel like I was moving closer to my goals versus just chasing more constantly. Am I making sense?
Totally. I think what you're clarifying is how to get out of this idea, or not idea, but actual way of being, of chasing more, simply by understanding what it is that actually matters to you. Because it's in that, going back to that overconsumption and, like, feeling like you can never catch up, it seems to be from this place of not being clear on what it is that actually matters to us. I remember, I can't remember where it was, but it was a couple of months ago. Nick said something like, if you're watching a bunch of motivational videos every day to get shit done, like, something's not aligned in your life. And I was like, oh, that's so true though. Like, if you need all this extra information, it's simply because you don't know what you're working towards. The other thing that I love, Joyce, that you touched on was looking in the mirror. That's, I think, probably one of my favorite concepts I've taken out of, I don't know if we went super deep into it in CCA or not. I just know Nick talks about it a lot, and how you were able to take principles that are often relevatory to business for most people and into your personal life. I'm really passionate about that myself, is using the mirror for that opportunity. You actually talked a little bit about that on our last, I think you did talk about it on our Luna Den call, like seeing certain things about yourself and your children. Yeah. And that's just, it's the most confronting thing to do, is to look at these principles that everyone preaches online. And, like, it's so easy to go post about it on Facebook and talk about it, right? And, like, be this expert guru at all these just ways of being, but to actually be them and know that it's true for you in your life. Like, how is it showing up in the people around you and the people closest to you? So I just had to touch on that one, because that one's,
that's one of the biggest, like, you kind of touched on there, is, like, Dan talks about, he quotes saying, like, hyperbolic postings online, and then they talk a lot about, both Nick and Dan talk about the all or nothing, and that's one of the biggest things. I think learning to operate, Nick's famous for saying, right, it depends, right? Well, it depends, and there's so many, like, like just blanket statements that people are putting out there. Like Joyce, just before this call, we were talking and she's like, hire slow and fire fast, right? Like, yeah, every time it's like, okay, great. Well, not actually an implementation. Like it doesn't always, it's like, no matter what, okay, so you have a business with 30 employees and okay, you immediately just fire people and like with no plan or whatever, right? Like with no conversation, so that's just these statements that sound great, right? Like Dan talks about burn the boats, like just go all in, like, okay, just risk everything and just jump. What about the people that didn't work out for? How did that go? And they had 3 kids in a home or whatever, you know what I mean? So like these statements that just happen, it's usually, and so it's like, it's we want things to be so simple, like that simple, like just people just tell me the answer, yes or no, black or white, I'll just do this, versus actually like live in the gray, that there's a million different other possibilities here. And that's what you talked about, it's preference. It depends on your unique disposition and what you actually want to get closer towards for what your decision. And that's not, like, I think Nick talks about that too. It's like, that's not maybe the most popular viral thing that's going to go around, because right? It depends. You need to, it's unique to you. Like, I just want the answer. You know what I mean? Like, I just give me an easy answer, but it's,
well, because it's like all this internet chatter about self-improvement is that there's a lot of phrases that just become so popular that you think they're so easily implementable. Even the one we were just saying before we went live, like feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's like, that is actually not relevant in a lot of situations. Like if I'm fearful of doing something that isn't getting me closer to what matters to me, no, don't do it anyway, So all of these things that they hold so much more nuances than we want them to, because like you were saying, Ben, it's a lot easier to go ask someone else for the answer than to ask ourselves. Like that's where there's so much, within the principles and everything we're learning, but without that, like actually taking the time within yourself to know what's true and to be honest about it, even when you feel like, Joyce, you were speaking about the shame and the guilt for the amount of time you didn't spend doing that, and recognizing those emotions, we are just running those circles. So
yeah, and sometimes things can be more just simpler if we actually just took the time to like look in the mirror, and then all progress starts with honesty. So for me, it was like, well, if I'm saying one of the important parts of my solvable problem is to spend quality time with my kids, I'm like, well, then why am I making all these other decisions that are getting me further away from that, right? And so I like realized that I really need to be clear on what I'm trying to solve for, so that I can then just do it. So like one simple thing was when I was like, okay, I want to spend quality time with my kids. Well, what can I do right now? So one thing that I started to implement, because Randy talked about, he mentioned like you should only do the thing that you're good at, and like other things that you don't like, you should work on either delegating out or striving to delegate out. And I thought about it, I'm like, no, I really don't like going to the grocery store. I think that I'm not going to do that anymore. And I started to use Instacart like heavily, like their CCA got me like every day. Like
that's over here like, oh God, like, the Instacart bill.
But I would feel a lot of shame and guilt because, I've had moms, typical OC area. I've had people say like, oh,
I love this conversation, Joyce. I love it.
Oh, girl. It'd be like, they'd look at me and be like, ooh, you don't go to the grocery store? I'm like, no, girl, I haven't been to Costco in 4 months. I'm proud of that. But in the past, I would let that really, because I was having a lot of shame and guilt about, balancing being a mom and an entrepreneur. Like, I would feel like, oh, well, shoot, I better go to the grocery store. And I was wasting all this time. I mean, it sounds minor, but I was wasting all this time, effort, and mental energy and all these things. By the time I got home with my kids, I was like frustrated and I was annoyed. And that was actually getting me further away from what I wanted to do, which was just like, I wanted to cook with my kids, twice a week. And so instead of being already frustrated and impatient, all this stuff, I just Instacart the meal. It comes, I'm happy. I didn't waste all this time. And I use that time instead to, have quality time with my kids, like that I said I wanted. So it's like a simple decision of knowing who I am, playing my game, right? And then implementing this little thing called Instacart. And all of a sudden, I was able to recapture resources, reallocate resources, my time, my energy. And now I feel like, well, that little simple thing, right? Small changes lead to big transformation. That little thing led to me consistently cooking with my kids over the last 4 months. I didn't need to wait to do this huge, big decision to do this thing so that I could spend time with my kids. Like I could just do it right now. But it took me looking in that mirror and being brutally honest. Like I'm allowing other people's game. Like I'm trying to play somebody else's game of how they think I should be a mom or how I should work and balance being a mom, instead of really figuring out how do I do this? Like what's a win in this for me and for my kids? And just a simple thing about doing Instacart. And you know what? I have no shame in it. I have no shame in it anymore. No time spent on that.
I love that. I similarly, I do the same, but, and when you talk about playing your game, and we talk about this all the time, but if it's an unfamiliar term with anyone who's not in the CCA, I think even just to simplify it more, it's like not trying to live your life through someone else's eyes to meet their standards and approval. This is something I've been digging into a little bit deeper, just in my understanding of is like just how easy it is and how we train ourselves as humans to live to please everyone else. So where you live, Joyce, if there's this like standard and stigma of what a woman is, and you try to fit into that bubble, but it doesn't meet your standard of what a mom and an entrepreneur and all these and who you really are, there's that gap where you really aren't, it isn't ever enough. So something that is seemingly as small as going to the grocery store can end up being a really big ordeal. And I've even noticed that in my own life is just all these extra things that I was doing that I thought I just had to do that were taking up so much of my time and energy. And it's crazy to see what happens in your shift and just your whole way of being when you do something as simple as like, I'm not going to the grocery store anymore. That's why they made this beautiful thing called Instacart, and how much time and energy you get back now to focus on the thing that you really want to do. But that didn't come from, what I think is important to clarify is that didn't come from being like, oh, Instacart, cool, I don't like grocery shopping. What it came from was understanding you live in an environment around women that exhibit a way of being that you just don't resonate with. And it takes most people a really, really long time to come to that grip and understanding within themselves, because how uncomfortable we are being the person around many other people that just doesn't look the same or act the same or talk the same. So I have a lot of respect in your willingness to recognize that and make adjustments.
Yeah,
that's great insight.
And the reality, I think, is that most of us are likely surrounded just in our kind of automatic environments by people that are all completely caught up in this. They're not awake, right? And there's areas where we're not awake in this moment still, right? It's constant process. But like, that's what I've noticed, like Joyce mentioned it before, like when we go to the CCA events, for example, it's like this level, I think everyone there, we can just, it's like this mutants all together or something, right? I think misfits, it's like all of a sudden everyone's like, just feel so comfortable because everyone's like weird and different and doesn't care, but they're just being themselves. And like so many people around you are like, okay, a mom is supposed to do this, or an OC mom, or whatever it is, or like a male is supposed to like be tough and like not whatever, and like know how to fix, like, for example, me, I cannot like,
change a light bulb. He can't change a light bulb.
I'm not someone who's gonna fix something around the house. Like I could feel like not manly or whatever, about that, but like, or we could just hire a handyman. Whatever.
No, totally.
And it's not all just about like you said, it's not all just about outsourcing and like you're too good for this or too good for that. Because some people love that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But it's about actually when you can actually like let go of what I should be doing or what I should be, or like, and it's just that other people are judging me and I need to, and it kind of relates to what you were saying a little bit ago too. And the biggest difference I've noticed is a function of leadership in the CCA is there's so many programs, and we've been part of them, that there's like a guru or a master and you're trying to be like them, right? You're trying to be as make as much money as them, or be as successful as them, or do things like them or whatever, and everyone's just striving to like catch up to that.
Yeah.
And something that's and that works, I guess, right? Because like you got to keep paying them if you're gonna like learn from them, right?
It's true.
You know, so like, but Nick and Dan, that's where, you know, it's maybe not the smartest business advice, but it is at the same time. It's like they'll tell you all the time, it's like all the answers are already within you, you know. And so it's just a matter of having a supportive community and like learning from each other, but maybe from their own experiences. That's why, again, I love live events. Some of the most powerful things that I've gotten from them is like Dan and being vulnerable enough to share, well, this is what I went through in my accounting business. I actually learned, you know, that I really wanted to push for this big, huge, like nationwide thing. But I realized like, I don't like traveling away from my family. So like my friend is actually doing this where he's buying up all these accounting practices and I'm hitting Joyce, stuff like that. But it's like, I don't want to do that, you know? So, and he's like sharing stuff. And then Nick, I was able to ask him too, like he's had all these successful businesses start up over the years, and I asked like, hey, you know, when you went through that, would you have done anything differently? Like, and just sharing things like that. They're again, it's about, you know, it's about, and they'll tell you that it's inside you. It's not like you know, you might want something very different than they want. And one of the things I think that I wrote down that I always come back to that's counterintuitive that Nick says is that once you actually learn, I think he said, if you want to actually have $1 billion or do something, you know, massive, he said the best way is to lean into your own unique disposition and like be totally okay, be able to be uncertain about it. So the point was like, it's funny, like you said, when you can let go of like, okay, I don't need to build a $100 million business. I actually just want to play my game and like do what's important to me. It's like actually when you will be more successful or whatever, you know, have more success because you're actually leaning into your own unique gifts and dispositions of the things that are inside you. But you can't trick yourself though to like do it for that reason, like, because then you're doing it like for the wrong reason. So it's kind of a fascinating journey to be on, trying to understand that deeper.
Yeah, for sure. I love all this stuff. I think that just getting to hear both of your reflections, you can just tell when a person's actually grasping and like living this, as I was saying at the beginning, versus just taking a lot of the information and then spewing it out online. So I have a lot of respect for that. I'm curious to hear if you guys are open to sharing about how this has impacted your relationship. I know you guys are is that correct? You're business partners?
Yeah.
So you do business together, you parent together, you do networking events and all things together. And I know I can relate because PD and I do most of all of our things together too. And it's less common than common, I feel like, you know, so I'm just curious to hear how, all of this has affected your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, like when we first got together, and I mean, we got engaged quick and married fairly quickly compared to most standards. But obviously, like we had different careers and paths. So, and then that started to come together when we you know, bought a company and started building our own company. But still, there was some separation, I think, and part of it came with type of industry. You know, we were in hockey. Was our first business. You know, we've now grown to be like a larger sports holdings company. But at the time, you know, it was still kind of somewhat separated. So, you know, I think the first few years we did start building together, but Joyce kind of had her parts of things and I had kind of my parts of things. And that was okay. And as we had kids and things as well, like you said, things get like business and kids and relationship and everything, and then events. And I was traveling a lot early on too, apart from Joyce.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I don't know if I had a realization, or there might be a few times that Joyce held my feet to the fire as well, you know, early on. But I realized like none of this mattered without my marriage. You know, first. So like, it doesn't matter if it was successful or not, even if it was going to be more successful or bigger or whatever it is, like nothing was going to be successful without a successful marriage. And so, you know, I had to get my priorities in order. I mean, my commitment to God first, my commitment to my wife second on earth, and like made a decision that like, because I was doing separate, maybe masterminds or whatever like that. And we made a decision together just a few years ago that like, if we were going to do something, we were going to do it together or we weren't going to do it. So any program, like we do CCA together, when we go to DG engineering together, we go to summits together, because I don't want one of us, we didn't want one of us to like, we don't want to grow apart. We want to grow together. And it's funny. It's actually just what we talked about with playing your own game and leaning into your own unique disposition. The funny thing is like, because sometimes because you could think like I could trick myself that we could get more done by separating, right? Like, because she could watch the kids these weekends and I would go to these events and learn this stuff for the business. And then other times like she could go, or maybe like, oftentimes also it's a lot more expensive to do both of us in these programs, so it's like, well, I don't know, like why would we spend both? I could just learn it and then I can teach Joyce it, or vice versa or whatever. But counterintuitively, the more that we've done it together, the results have been much, much bigger by doing that and growing together and just being, and you know what, if for whatever they're not, that's okay too, because what's the priority? Again, what do we actually want? Do I want to grow a business and then lose my marriage or compromise my marriage? And that's, that's something that really just probably 3 or 4 years has really been full out.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. I would say like it's not as common, like you said, Courtney, for like a husband and wife team, for example, to work together. Although I am seeing it more and more, right? But and to again, play your game, right? It's something that definitely works between Ben and I think there's a number of reasons why. Number one, we have different skill sets and different strengths. So that's, there's not the overlap in what we do is very small, right? And so we're clear on that, and we have built like structure into how we like run business together. And if there's a disagreement, how do we resolve those things, right? And having communication, although I still can improve with my communication for sure. Ben's an excellent communicator, but there's a lot of extra stuff that needs to be in place foundationally, I think, for like a husband and wife team, because at the end of the day, you're a husband and wife. So there's business and there's husband and wife. So you have to be able to at times separate the two. And then at times it makes sense to have it together. What I like about CCA and what's really helped us tremendously is now we have this shared language. And it's actually, like Ben said, it's given us way more momentum and like has catapulted us even further, because, for example, if something comes up and like, Ben being the, interviewing on behalf of Wolf Den or whatever the case is, and he's like, oh, should I do this? I'm like, play your game, and it's done. Like, we're like 3 words, right? And he knows what to do. And so we will do that a lot. Like, oh, that's all or nothing. Like when I'm being, however way I'm being about a solution, for example, whether it's in business or even approaching how we're going to handle the kids, like he could say like, that's all or nothing. And then I'll go back and like think about it in journal and see that, oh yeah, it is, right? And so it's allowed us to really like create the shortcut, if you will, with whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. And again, I think what's really important, again, is looking in the mirror, really getting clear on your solvable problem and figuring out like how does that work between both of us. But yeah, for me, CCA's allowed us to connect on even on a deeper level, like, because it's all stuff within us, and then just using the language to shortcut everything.
Yeah, no, I love all of that. And I can relate in certain instances. I'm biased, but I think that it's so much more fun to do all of these things with your partner. Because like you said, like the language sharing, and also you do get a much deeper connection going at it in that way. And of course, to each their own, it really isn't for everyone. And in my partnership, we don't quite as in depth to do business the way you two do together as business partners. But I will say it's not easy. Like it's totally not easy. So I can't even imagine being in your guys' shoes, to what extent that creates like complexities. But at the same time, there's just such a gift. I think at the end of the day, knowing that you get to kind of create that solvable problem we keep speaking of, just being of like, what the heck do you really care about? What do you really want? If you have a goal, does it really matter to you, like personally, individually? But then being able to go out those together. So
Yeah, I think for us, it's like we have the same shared mission and vision and values.
Yeah.
Clearly, according to, you know, both of us, we're very different people. In terms of our personality, we're not the same. And I think that's what adds to the excitement of working together. But at the end of the day, when we are able to use these frameworks, these principles, these things that Nick and Dan have really highlighted, it allows us to get really clear on our mission, vision, and values. We have a shared mission, vision, and values. Now, how we get there can have a million different ways that I might think that we should do it, or he might think that we should do it. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't solve whatever it is we're trying to solve, then it's like we don't do
Well,
it.
and it has its challenges, like you said. I just
Yeah,
a
for
couple
sure.
specific examples, like, because we have to make, we have to, like Nick talks about bumpers, right? We have to make rules and things sometimes for us as well. And we're not always perfect. Like, for example, like there's times when both of us, like, we're getting ready for bed, you're like in bed, you maybe had like a really stressful day or whatever that you're like you just went through this like kind of calming down routine or something like that. You know what I mean? You're like getting ready to like, okay, come to sleep. And then one of us will be like, oh, can you believe like this some employee or whatever,
By
like, you know,
us,
whatever.
you know,
like, yeah, you know what I mean? So and it's like I'm in bed, it's 10:45 at night, like, you know what I mean? You know, we just, you know, it's not like, because most people don't have their business partner or their someone at work like in that environment. So it's gonna be nonstop, it can be 24/7.
Yeah.
So like that's a non-negotiable, like we've created for ourselves, and we're not always perfect. I do it too. Joyce does it more than I do. and then like then also though for us, like we've created like another non-negotiables. One day we do a date day, like one day a week, where it's just together time, and it's not business. It's not like folks. And again, it's not always 100% like perfect, but we take a day and we don't talk about business, and we do husband and wife, because otherwise we're always business partners, you know, and it's like nonstop. And then you know, so and then the last thing is that Joyce's point is about just different roles. Like we are very different, you know. It's so some people, like I think Dan mentioned, for example, when playing their game, they go through this exercise where they talk about like when you were playing a sport growing up or an instrument or something, like what were you when you were a kid, you know. And like Dan said, like him and his wife are both like shooting guards, kind of like they both like want to take the last shot. He's like, if they work together, they'd be fighting over the ball, kind of thing, you know, to take the last shot, kind of thing. So they again, like you said, it's different for different types of people. Joyce and I tend to work great like that in comparison to the other. I'm definitely more of like the facilitator, and Joyce is actually like the one who wants the
wild card over here.
Joyce is the wild card. Yeah. So
you guys crack me up. I love it.
But you know what's awesome is that Ben allows me to be me and play my game. And so I'm gonna come to events and I'm gonna do my thing the way that I do my thing. And that's the way it's going to be. And he's not going to try to put me in a box, because he knows that's.
I used to have a harder time with that.
Do not put me in a box.
Because like we'd be like at some like serious thing or something, right? And then like, you know, like Joyce, Joyce doesn't have a filter. She'll just tell some like crazy story or something maybe really embarrassing about me, or like say something maybe that I would deem very offensive or something like that. And I used to be like kicking her under the table, like, you know, whatever. And then we would cause problems. So now I just kind of drink and my thing and let her just rip. And people love it. And they're laughing and then they're hugging me after and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's great. So you just let Joyce be Joyce.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge in a partnership, is the ability of what you said, Joyce, is he lets me play my own game. Like, the ability to let the other people, even just in general, like, and letting other people be themselves, I think also stems from allowing ourselves to be ourselves. Like when we feel, whatever we feel about the other person not being able to do it. But I think that's all people really pick up, is that approval piece. Like if I'm in approval of playing my own game, living life my way, other people, although it may like ruffle some feathers at first, I think over time, it gives this permission for others to do the same. And so I think that's tends to be what happens in relationships, at least just in my experience, is like, at first it may just be a bit triggering to be like, why are you so weird? And why are you so unfiltered? I felt the same about PD at first in public. I'd be like, why do you have to do these things all the time? It was like, wait a minute, I want to be able to live this unfiltered. And so Yeah, I think it's really beautiful when one person can allow the other person, and then it's just from there a ripple effect, and we allow others in the world to do the same if you know they're open, of course.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. This will bring us a little full circle. So you said, how did we meet Nick? Right? That was
Yes, you
Joyce
never
doing
mentioned that.
Joyce.
Oh yeah, that never would have
Joyce
happened
doing
without
Joyce
Joyce
thing.
playing Joyce's game. Yes.
Yeah. So we're, Ben signs us up for some event, like
Well, we were in a mastermind,
yeah.
like this autumn less
Whatever,
it was
who
good,
cares?
but
Move
and
on.
Steve Sims was in it in the
Yeah.
same mastermind as well, and he posted one day in the Facebook group. It was like a private Facebook group. He posted in there, who wants to come to prison with me? And he had set this thing up at a maximum security prison where you go and you help teach entrepreneurship to basically people that are in there for life. And I don't know what got into me, but I was like, I'm like, we should do this. And this is just like this interview. I just signed us up because Joyce would never commit to anything.
No.
So I just signed us up, and you donate.
Wait, I think this is what happened when you when you told me we were doing this. I think at first Joyce didn't know because I told her and she goes, "What?"
Yeah,
exactly. You're like, "Oh, you're doing it." I'm
Joyce
like,
will never do. Joyce will never do it. I just signed us up for things. Basically, that's how she got into CCA too. By the way,
like, you're starting on Tuesday. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll fine. But
so then we were going to the event, and the night before they had Steve Sims was hosting like a speakeasy at this bar in LA because the prison was out in Bakersfield. So you stay overnight in the hotel, and then they bus you like 2 hours out to this thing. Yeah. So he's hosting a speakeasy, and you just go and hang out and have some drinks, and so that's Steve Sims' kind of scene. So cool. And then Joyce, and I was just sitting there like whatever. And then I don't know where Joyce went. And so Joyce, you tell the story about how you
I was gone for like 45 minutes. Well, there was like, people in the group, and I'm like, okay, they're interesting. But there was like this one dude off in the corner, like resting bitch face, just like, if y'all know Nick, you know what I'm talking about. He was sitting and he was not like making any eye contact. And I'm like, that's a dude that clearly wants me to approach him. So let me go and do that. So I went over, then I had no idea who he was. I didn't even know that he was part of like organizing the whole thing as part of Steve Sims. Like, obviously Nick's a big deal and I didn't know it. And then I just went up there and we just chatted for I don't know how long. And he was like so interesting. Like, as you know, if he just like one thing after the next, like just marketing, just teaching me all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, just completely intrigued. And then I go like 45 minutes later and it's like this dark bar and I'm like heading in the corner with Nick. Like, and then I go and like 45 minutes later, I'm like, Ben, oh my God, I met this guy and you need to meet him. He's like the most interesting person I've ever met. And I don't think you met him that night. Cause I think he like, he found his exit and he left. Like no one even, I was like, where did he go? Like he was gone. Right. And I didn't know anything. He was just gone. And I don't even know if I really fully knew if he was part of the event or not. Next day we go to the event and we're all, doing our thing or whatever. And then it's like a whole day that at the end of the event, like Steve Sims is doing a speech and then like he calls up Nick and I'm like, Ben, that's the guy. That's him. You need to meet him. And then so, and then on the long bus ride back, I was able to introduce Ben and that like is the story of connecting with Nick. How many years ago? Like 4 years ago.
5 years ago, maybe. And I ended up having a chance to talk with them on the bus ride back for a while. And he gave us all kinds. So his office ended up being really, at the time was really close to where we lived. And
like 10 minutes away.
Thursday night boardroom. So we used to go to Thursday night boardroom every month too, there with him and Jeff Moore. Interesting. The thing of Nick never talks about like that kind of stuff he does. I mean, he went and donated to go teach entrepreneurship at a maximum security prison with Steve Sims. And what other people probably don't know too is like, so the whole day you basically sit at an area and the different people come around and sit with you and spend time with you. And then you can help teach them things and stuff. And they share their story. And it's like, it's pretty crazy experience because a lot of them are in there for murder and things like that. And you go through these exercises where you learn about their history and things, and you find out that almost all of them were first convicted before they were 10 years old. Was the first time they had a parent in prison. They had
no father.
They had they were kind of initiated into like a gang or something, or like as a young like stuff that you just don't think about. And at the very end, you line up and I don't know if it's convicts, is that the right word? Just the prisoners, they're able to go and pass out like cards for the people that had like the most impact, like to give them something that they helped them. And like Nick is like super quiet the whole time, right? So, and like, most people didn't know who he was, but like all these like people were coming up to him, like giving him these cards after that he helped them, you know. And Joyce was probably actually like the second highest person, I think. But it was just like, so you're just like, I didn't know him yet too, but you're like, what, who's that guy? Like, look at that. And he just has this like still face, right? And they're giving him hugs and stuff, right? Like and he just like, you're like, what did he say to them, you know? So it's so that's how we met Nick.
The most interesting, that is the essence of Ben just letting me play my game and do whatever I'm gonna do. But that all the things that have happened since then, right? We worked with Nick and his other companies. He introduced us to Dan for our Dan's our accountant, and just so much stuff has happened from that moment. We actually met Brandon Strauss that night too. So it was just, you know, an amazing event. But coming back to Ben and I doing the thing, like just playing our game, and even at these networking events, and how the more authentic you are, whatever that looks like, that's when good things happen. The things that the time and randomness and all that stuff that Nick and Dan talk about, that's when that happens. The more authentic of a person you are, playing your game, the more things unfold exactly how they should. And you go away from that push, feeling that like guilt and shame and pushing to really feeling pulled towards something bigger than yourself. And it really, at the end of the day, allows us, all of us want to serve and help more people. And it gives us the ability to do that in exactly the way we're supposed to do that. So that's kind of the whole.
Yeah, I love it. I've heard I haven't heard you guys' meeting it from that story, but I heard of Brandon and Nick meeting in that event, which is so cool. I didn't realize that was something Steve Sims put on to teach into prison, but that's amazing. That's awesome. Really.
You want to learn about yourself? Go through that, because the reality is, like, speaking for myself, the amount of emotions that you feel in that whole process, from you don't know how you're going to feel when you walk into a maximum security prison, when they tell you, hey, when the sirens go off, you hit the ground, and there'll be like sniper shooters all over, like you just hit the ground. But like, just, you don't realize what you're going to feel when they're prepping you. And then when you meet them, because at the time that you don't, I guess he doesn't always do it at the maximum security prison, so it just depends on the situation that we went into was maximum security, the highest level of security in California, and all the people in there were in for life. So I would say like some horrible crimes like murder or worse, right? And then you're like thinking how, like, the emotions and that you run through, like trying to teach them entrepreneurship, and then seeing the humanity side, like after a little bit, like you start to shed all, like you feel scared. There's all kinds of emotions that you think you wouldn't feel, like, but then you do, right? There's this humanity side of it. So I think that was probably the start of me really starting to look inward of like, who am I? What do I say I really want to do? And how do I really want to help and serve people? And it just that was like a blast into honesty of your own humanity and feeling. So if that's something that somebody is interested in doing, really.
Does he still do that?
I think so.
Still works. I think he does it every year. It's with a company called Defy.
Okay, I gotta find out. I'll have to get connected and figure out, because I definitely want to do that. That's super cool. Okay, well, it's just for time purposes, let's spend the last little bit talking about what it is you're doing, Ben, and Wolf Den, and I don't know if I've said this yet live. For Luna Den members, we'll figure out how we're going to coordinate this. I don't have details, but I just want to open up the conversation so people are aware of like what it is you're creating and the intention. I know, as we talked earlier before being live, we're like, there's not really like a bunch of specificities, but yeah.
Yeah, it's still being developed. So with Wolf Den is launching a new segment, I guess you call it, called packs, discussion packs. And so there's going to be different ones, like there's going to be specific discussion areas for like real estate or different things like that. And so we're launching one called the CCA discussion pack. Courtney, we've invited Courtney to be a part of that, a contributor, moderator, admin, part of that. And I know she's passionate about getting the Lunadan involved. So like she said, we're working through that. So basically there's a lot of comments in Wolf Den and also on Twitter and everything about CCA and CCA principles and things, but there's not really anywhere for people to go and learn more and have conversations and things like that. So people that are in the Wolf Den or potentially in the Luna Den will be able to come into that Discord. They'll be able to talk with and chat with graduates, even teachers from time to time from the program, be able to practice some of the things like we talk about, like case in points or 6-word updates that you may see a lot of times on Twitter, and then have resources and things to some of the CCA materials. So right now it's kind of, CCA is a big investment, and it's not something that everyone is able to do maybe or do right now. And so for people that want to be able to learn more about it and talk to people who've actually been through it and implementing it and things like that, it's going to be a great community for them to do that.
Yeah, I love it. I think too, just to for us who've been through it, is we have our own awareness of what it's taught us, right? And that's why I bring these conversations with different CCA members on, is different lived experience teaches differently to different people. So I think something that I'm really excited about is to see how graduates and I don't know if you'll have students in there, if it'll just be graduates, students as well. Okay. How we can just kind of like elaborate our own experience of what it's taught us through life, through business, through relationships. It just brings a whole different level of application for everyone else. So that'll be really cool. I'm really excited about it.
Totally. And I think it's like to have actually a community of people that, like you said, current student, and that's to provide that place for people to talk about those things that they've learned or how they're understanding it, or how are you understanding, how are you implementing it with your kids, how are you implementing it in your business, that type of thing. And to have a place to do that as a community, I think is going to be really powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm really excited about it. Well, I'll keep Luna Den updated as far as how that'll all work. We'll figure it out. But you don't have time frame as far as when we're starting it, or is it kind of?
I think. No, I saw a Twitter post by Wolf Den Crypto saying they're launching a couple of packs within 7 days. So
I think great. This is awesome.
So I think we're getting it ready to launch. Obviously, it's going to be something that grows and evolves, and we're going to have contributions from the community. So I would imagine it's going to be launched in the next week or two.
Awesome. Wow. Soon. I love it. When we do something, we just do it, right? Not think about it.
You learn along the way, right? We're not going to learn until we get started. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. I just truly it's so fun being in your guys' space, being around you. I think I met you both in San Diego. It was my first time meeting you both in person. And I was instantly like, I did not stop telling Petey after we got back from that trip, like, I love Ben and Joyce. I just love being around them. Just have great energy. So thank you both so much for jumping on. This was really, really fun. We'll have to have you guys on again for sure.
Thanks, Courtney. Thank you for doing this. You shine bright over there yourself. So we're, anytime you want us, I'm sure Ben will raise his hand and
you just have to,
I'll sign Joyce up. I'll sign Joyce up.
He'll sign me up.
This is not relationship advice, but let's try that out, see how it goes.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there. For those who watched, leave your